So, welcome to Home Buying 101. Some of you are current clients, some of you are prospective clients, which is good. Have some different kind of levels here in the process. So we should get a good variety of questions, which is lovely. So a little bit of a quick agenda for you guys. I'm going to just give you a really quick intro, then we're going to dive right into the home buying process. We'll take a quick break for questions, but again, feel free to interrupt. And then the most important part of the presentation is that why buy section. You guys are already here, you're already thinking about buying, but it's really important to me that I relay some specific information to you so you know exactly what the benefits are because they're pretty substantial. And then we'll wrap up with next steps. So a couple quick rules, please keep your mic muted, but do feel free to interrupt with questions. Please use the information. And then most importantly, if you're currently paying rent, please stop as soon as humanly possible. Okay, you guys all know me, so I'll keep this part short. I'm Chelsea, I'm 31, I'm a realtor in Colorado. I presently own 6 properties in the Denver area. It took me about 6 years to purchase all of those, and I am what is called a house hacker. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that at the end because I actually teach a class on that as well. Before getting into real estate, I had a construction business. I started that when I was 19, ran it for almost 8 years before successfully selling that off. And I wanted to sell that company and get into real estate because I love working on homes, but I wanted to do something that mattered a little bit more, had a little bit more purpose. So when it comes to real estate, I'm really focused on education, also long-term relationships, and then last but not least, to help other people achieve wealth. I really love our teachers and respect the heck out of what they do. However, when it comes to the actual education system in the US, I think, frankly, it's pretty much garbage because we don't actually teach applicable skills that you're going to need in life, such as how to purchase a home. So I try to fill in the gaps of that education when I can. So let us jump into what you came here for, which is the home buying process. So overall, there's kind of 5 sections of purchasing a property. So the main steps are, number 1 is pre-approval. The second one is finding a real estate agent and going and searching for homes. The third is writing offers and negotiating. The fourth is all of the due diligence that you'll do once you're under contract on a home to make sure that you still want to buy it. And then last but not least is the closing, which is where you wrap everything up. So we'll go through each of these. Just for fun, let's have Sam answer this one. Sam, do you know when you can or should talk to a lender?
I would say, you probably talk to a lender at any point, right? To see what you can qualify for. So it's probably just worth knowing where you're at.
Well done. You're a pro already.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah. So basically, as soon as possible. So I have a lot of people that come to me and they're a year out from buying, they're 2 years out from buying. That's perfect. You can go get at least a pre-qualification with a lender. You don't even have to go through the pre-approval process. So they won't do a hard pull of your credit, which is wonderful. And then that'll at least give you an idea of what you're going to be able to qualify for. So what purchase price can you get? And that's going to be helpful because if that's not quite where you want it to be, you'll have time to make adjustments. So I usually relate this to, hey, if you were going to go drive across the country to North Carolina from Colorado, you would probably need a map. And when you're going to make your largest financial investment, a pre-approval is the same thing. It gives you the financial map to get there. So earlier, the better. So what the heck is a pre-approval? So what you will first do is you'll speak to some lenders. I have some lovely lenders that I would love to put you in touch with. Just a reminder, in case you don't know this, I receive absolutely nothing. It is illegal to get a kickback from any person that I recommend. I only recommend them because I know that they're badass and they'll do a great job for you. And if you have a great experience with me, you're more likely to refer me out and yada, yada, yada. So it's mutually beneficial. So I have great lenders if you need some. But basically what you'll do is you'll take a couple of those lenders, you'll get on the phone with them, they'll do a quick phone call, and then they'll send you a link to actually fill out an application. And that application is going to ask you a ton of really invasive questions, like how much do you make every single month? Let's look at your credit. What do you think your credit is? Or let's do a credit pull. What are your current debts? Do you have student loans? Do you have a car, et cetera, et cetera? And from that, they're going to do what's called a mortgage analysis, is what I like to refer to it as. And basically, what they're going to do is they're going to look at your current monthly, and I specify monthly for a reason. They're going to look at your monthly income, your monthly debt, and then look at the ratio between the two of those, which is called your debt to income ratio, to see what you can afford on a monthly basis. And part of that mortgage analysis is not just saying, hey, guess what? You're pre-approved to $800,000. And you're like, holy moly, I don't really want to pay $6,000 a month in a mortgage payment. So the mortgage analysis is actually looking at where are you really comfortable on a monthly payment basis? And then what does that down payment look like? Are there any changes or adjustments you want to make? And also, what loan type do you qualify for at that purchase price? Once you've gone through that process with a lender, basically you will have what the total purchase price is that lines up with what your comfortable monthly payment is. And they will likely give you a what's called a pre-approval letter up to that purchase price amount so that you can submit that with offers. A couple of quick tips here on how to shop lenders, because I know that 2 of you are currently shopping and 1 of you will be shopping. So, a couple of tips. Number 1, please don't just talk to 1 person. Really good idea to talk to at least 2, maybe up to 3 people. And when you are talking to these lenders, you don't necessarily just want to go off of who gives you warm fuzzies. That's, of course, really important. The financial process is pretty invasive, so you do want to work with someone you're comfortable with. But also, you want to work with somebody that you are certain can get the deal done, because most deals that I work on that fall out of contract are because of the lender, not because of the home, the inspection process, or anything on my side. So you want to make sure that they can get it done. And then secondly, of course, you want to make sure that they're giving you a great rate and that you're not getting screwed over by going with 1 person because you didn't shop. So what you'll want to specifically compare with these lenders is, number 1, what is the interest rate that they're giving you? Number 2, what is the monthly payment associated with that interest rate at X purchase price? And you just want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So don't compare someone at 520 versus this person at 500. Make sure the purchase prices are the same. And then a little bit of an asterisk here in that monthly mortgage payment. So that includes your principal and your interest. So that's for your loan, but it also includes your taxes and your insurance. So that is paid as a part of your monthly payment. So you want to make sure that you're comparing taxes and insurance estimations between lenders, because they are estimations. They're just guessing how much they think you'll be paying in insurance or how much they think you'll be paying in taxes. So you just want to look at those 2 numbers and almost remove them so that you can see what the monthly payment is outside of that to compare apples to apples. And then last but not least, this is probably the most important, and this is where I see lenders get a little shady, is you want to look at what the total cash to close is. So cash to close is your down payment plus your closing costs to get the loan, which we'll talk about in a second. And you want to compare that number, because what a lot of lenders will do is, if they know that you're shopping, and by the way, you don't even have to tell them that you're shopping. If they see that your credit report has been pulled, they know that you're shopping. Is they will say, okay, I know that this person is shopping, and so I want to offer them a lower interest rate to look better compared to that other person. And what they actually end up doing is charging you to buy the interest rate down to make that rate look better. And you'll see that in your total cash to close, because you'll see that the closing costs from that person are $4,000 or $5,000 higher. So pro tips, just make sure you're talking to multiple people, you're comparing monthly payment, you're comparing interest rate, and you're also comparing total cash to close. Questions there before we keep going? Perfect. Seeing none, let's talk about what factors into qualifying. So first things first is your credit score and credit history. Luckily, none of you guys are 18 years old trying to buy a home, so this shouldn't be too much of a problem. If somebody in the pre-approval process is having trouble with credit and you've got time on your side, I highly recommend this fun free program called Experian Boost. This is how we were actually able to boost my wife's credit score before we got married. In about 6 months, we got her score to where it needed to be for her to buy her first rental property. Basically, what Experian Boost does is it will take monthly payments that you have, like a cell phone or your electric bill or your Wi-Fi bill, and it will treat it as normal like debt accounts. And so every month that you pay those on time, you get credit for on-time payments. So rather than just getting credit for your car or for your student loans or your credit card, that's 3 accounts, right? If you sign up all your utilities in your cell phone, now you could be literally doubling the number of on-time payments that you have every month using that program. So highly recommend, or if you have friends struggling, recommend it to them, please. Okay, the second one is your down payment size. So if you've got $100,000 to put down, your financial situation and what you qualify for will probably be a little bit different than if you only have $5,000. So that will certainly factor in. However, down payment is not everything. The other thing that's really important is income stability and employment history. I don't believe that any of you guys are self-employed. If you are self-employed, it is much more difficult to get approved for a loan. I know because I am self-employed and always have been. Basically, if you are self-employed, you're going to need to show at least 2 years of tax returns from your business. So if you opened a business a year ago, you're not going to qualify. So 2 years of tax returns for your business, and what they will do is they'll typically average out the income from those 2 years to say, okay, if you made 100,000 one year and 50,000 one year, your average is $75,000 a year. So that also will matter. For people that are into new jobs, don't worry about that too much. The big thing is just don't change jobs while you're under contract. The next one is your current debt. So I specified the word monthly a little bit ago. Intentionally, which is when lenders are looking at your debt, they're really looking at your monthly obligation, not so much the total obligation. So a lot of first-time buyers come to me and they're really worried about their student loans. Hey, don't stress if you've got $50,000 in student loan debt if your payment's only $200 a month. You're likely only going to get knocked for the $200 a month versus your monthly income. So that can be helpful. Cars are the worst purchase you could ever make in your life, if you didn't know that, by the way. But one thing I want to tell you about cars is if you are thinking about buying a car, and I don't know why these go hand in hand, but people buy a car, buy a house, and get engaged or get married all at the same time, really expensive stuff. I would recommend in terms of an order that you buy the house and then buy the car. If you buy the car first, now you have that on your credit report, which is going to hurt you when you go to buy a much more expensive thing, the house, and that monthly debt is going to weigh against you for your DTI. So if you need a new car, please do it after closing. Sam, yes.
This is like a very one-off, like specific question for my own circumstances. So we're considering like downsizing to just one car. I've got like a 2020 like CX-5 that it's basically almost paid off. So I'm like very close to just like being done with it, but I'm also considering selling it just to kind of like, again, build more money towards a down payment anyways for a home. Would you recommend that given the circumstances, we can just like lease a car in the interim? Would that make more sense in your opinion? Again, very weird kind of non-real estate related question. But
well, the interesting thing is, I don't know if the lender is going to care. So the lease is probably going to show up on your credit report, actually. So like if your car is almost paid off, you would actually be better off paying it off and getting it off your credit report altogether rather than having this monthly payment show back up on a lease.
Got it. Okay.
So, but talk to a lender. This is one of these things where I have to say, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lender. You should talk to a lender. And I can send you one too for you guys just to check. But I'm glad you came because you have this big decision to make, right? So it's a great point to check in before you do something.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, last but not least is the loan programs. So we'll talk about those here in a second. All right, this one is going to Nick and Megan. Quiz question. How much money do you have to put down to buy a house?
You don't have to put money down, is that correct?
Almost, more or less. It depends on the loan. For some loans, yes. So I'm going to count it as a yes. Thanks for participating. Okay, so here are some of the different loan programs and what the necessary down payment requirements are. The main thing that I just want to emphasize here so strongly to you all is that you absolutely do not need 20% down in order to buy a home. I have had several first-time buyers come to me and they're like, oh, I'm at 15%. It's going to take me another year to save 20%. And that's absolutely insane to do that. In the meantime, prices are going up and you end up paying more. So it's just crazy. So a couple of different loan programs. Conventional loans are one of the most common ones across the board. The minimum that you'll have to put down as a first-time buyer for a conventional loan is 3%. Just so you guys know, when you go to buy your second home, the minimum you'll be able to put down with conventional is 5%. So they give you a little bit of a gift on the first one, if you will. So 3% for your first home, 5% for your second home. And then you can put as much down more than that with conventional that you want. VA is for if we have any veterans. I don't think we do in the room, but if you are a veteran, you could qualify for your VA benefit and put 0% down and not pay mortgage insurance. So it's a pretty good freaking gig. The next two are really, really common amongst first-time buyers, especially in Denver because of our prices. So the third one here is FHA. So this is a loan program where your credit can be a little bit lower. Your debt to income can be a little bit lower. It's just a little bit more flexible of a loan. So a lot of first-time buyers find themselves in that range, and that's fine. The minimum down payment on that one is 3.5%. And then last but not least, we have CHFA. This is specific to Colorado, but there's actually a few other down payment assistance programs in some of the metro areas. So like Denver has a Denver Metro DPA program. But basically what this is down payment assistance. So if you've been driving around Denver and heard on the radio from American Financing, buy a house for as little as $1,000 down. This is what they're talking about. With most of these loan programs, you're only obligated to bring $1,000 of your own money to the table. You might be surprised with how high the income limits are on these down payment assistance programs. The last time I checked, it was over $100,000. So if you can qualify for a down payment assistance option, that might be really nice for you. And some of the programs, it's a forgivable grant, so you don't ever have to pay it back. On others, you do have to pay it back. So you just want to ask good questions to your lender there. Why the heck is a pre-approval so important? If you guys were interested in purchasing a car, as an example, it might be okay to go look at some cars one day just to check things out, whatever. But at the point that you're really ready to buy a car, you need to have your finances in order, right? You're not going to go shop and not have the money to do so. It's very similar with a home. It's really important that you have your pre-approval figured out so that you know what you actually can qualify for, because it's not as straightforward as purchasing other things. And because of this, you'll go get your pre-approval. It will make sure that you see the right houses. So the worst case scenarios, we go look at, $500,000 homes because that's what you think you'll qualify for based on an online mortgage calculator. And we find a house and you love it. And then you decide to go through the pre-approval process. Number one, you'll be too late to the game with how competitive it is. You won't even have a chance. But number two, you might find out that you're actually only qualified for $400,000. And now you just fell in love with something that you can't afford, and we're going to have to seriously realign your expectations. So really good idea to go do it before you look. And in fact, my team is a little unique in the fact that we require it before we'll look at houses together, with an asterisk here, outside of our discovery day, which is something that's unique to our team too. We'll talk about that. Okay, quiz question. How much does a buyer's agent cost you? You might be saying, Chelsea seems pretty good at her job. I bet she's expensive. How do I get paid? Anyone can jump in. I know one of you knows the answer.
Aren't you paid on the commission of the home? You're not
Yes.
actually paid. There might be like a fee potentially, but the commission off of the home.
Yes, so it's based off of the purchase price.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a percentage of the purchase price, and it is actually my job to negotiate my payment with the seller. So the way that I write my agency agreements is that you as a buyer are technically on the hook for paying my commission. However, because you're on the hook, it allows me to actually go ask the seller for them to pay me. So I've only ever had one buyer ever pay my agency commission. He was well aware, it was all worked out, it was fair for all parties. Otherwise, the seller has always paid my commission. So that is how I personally do it. So there should be no fee to you as a buyer when you work with me. Okay, so let's talk about agency. The way that I like to think about agency is basically the difference between a coach and a referee. So if I'm your coach, which means that we have a signed agency agreement together, I'm allowed to coach you. I'm allowed to tell you how to play, advocate for you, etc. Whereas if we don't have a signed agency agreement in Colorado, by default, I have to act like a referee, which is basically somebody that can tell you the rules of the game, but they can't tell you how to play. They can't actually coach you. So as soon as we have an agency agreement signed, it's interesting because I'm actually a fiduciary to you at this point, the same way an attorney is. So I'm actually legally obligated to represent your best interests at all times. And as I said, I negotiate my fee with the seller. So it's a pretty good gig for you. The other thing that's really important is unless I have an agency agreement signed, I actually can't negotiate on your behalf. I can't speak for you because, again, I have to play like a referee. So early on in our process, we typically send out agency agreements to buyers so that they have plenty of time to review them, ask questions, etc. And then at some point, we'll all sign that agency agreement so that I can do my job fully. The other really important thing for you to understand about these agency agreements, particularly our agency agreements, is that they are an exclusivity agreement. What that means is we're dating while you're doing the discovery day, etc. And then we sign this document and now we're married, but divorce is always an option, right? So what it means is, hey, you don't have to buy a house, but what it says is that if you're going to, I'm going to be the person that you work with. And then it also states that if I'm not fulfilling my duties, you can fire me at any point with a written notice. So that's agency. It's good stuff. Okay, so at this point, you've gotten your pre-approval. You've found a badass agent to represent you on your purchase. You're feeling good. Now it's time to get your search set up. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about your criteria. So what are the minimum number of beds, baths, square footage, garage, property type? What areas do you want to be in? What price range are we looking up to from that pre-approval? So we'll set up a search for you on what's called the MLS. So the MLS is where properties actually get listed for sale. I know that everybody's looking at Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all super sexy. But what's not sexy is getting incorrect information. And those sites regularly have incorrect information because that's not actually where properties get listed for sale. They get listed for sale on the MLS, and then those sexy sites sync the data from the MLS. But it's a very imperfect process because the algorithms, et cetera, are always changing. So when we set up a search for you, it's going to be on the MLS, and we try to make this as easy as possible for you. So we give you access to a portal, and that portal is going to start to email you results that match your criteria when or if they come on the market, there's a price change, et cetera. So you won't actually have to go out and look at sites. You'll be able to just jump into your portal and see everything that's on there that's a fit based on your criteria. After we've got your electronic search set up, then we'll talk about going out in person. So one thing that's unique to my team that I've trained is we will do what's called a discovery day for your first set. So even if you're 6 months out or potentially up to a year out, I'd love to do this with you. Basically what we do is we pick 4 or 5 houses and we go look at them in person. And this is just so far out from you being ready to purchase that there is zero pressure whatsoever that you're going to find a home and want to offer on it. So you get to just go and look at homes, which is super fun, but most importantly, you get to learn. So when we take you into the homes, we're going to be asking you a ton of questions, interrogating you almost. And basically what we're trying to do is help you narrow in on your criteria. So I like to think of the search process as kind of like a funnel. So when we're starting at the top of the funnel, it's the fat part of the funnel. It's the wider net. That's where we got more search results. And then as you start seeing properties, we keep refining your criteria until we get all the way down to where we finally find the house that you like. So in that first set, we're going to be asking you questions about your criteria to help you narrow down, and then we'll adjust your search accordingly. And then more importantly, when we're taking you out, it's great that you love the natural light and the high ceilings. That's wonderful. But what we're more focused on is teaching you about, hey, here's a water heater. It's 8 years old. They only last 10 to 12 years old, and they're about $2,200 to replace. So when we're out, we're going to be teaching you about the major mechanical systems like the furnace, the AC, the water heater, anything structural that we see, roofs, concrete, anything that you can think of. We're going to try to teach you as much as possible, so that hopefully by the time you get to the point of wanting to offer on a property, you'll know from our kind of analysis of it if it's a good purchase or not. So that discovery day is super fun. You narrow in on what you want to buy and you learn a lot. So we'll go see 4 or 5 houses at that time. After that, you're the one that steps on the gas and on the brakes. It's all up to you. So it could be the day after that discovery day, or it could be 6 months later. But we'll go out again together. And this time the intention is to buy. So when we're going out on the second set, we're not going to go look at 4 or 5. We're typically looking at 1 or 2 because we should have already narrowed in by quite a bit. And we're going to go look at those as they come on the market so that they're not gone by the time you get into it. One of the most common questions I get from first-time buyers is how many homes do people normally look at? My average is 10 to 15 homes total, and that includes that first discovery day. So the first set, we go look at 4 or 5. The second set, we might look at 2, maybe 3. And then each time after that, we're just looking at one-offs. So by the time we get to 10, you should be pretty offer ready, as long as I've done a good job of helping you narrow down. And just one note for you guys, as I mentioned, everything we just talked about, so pre-approval, find an agent, set up your online search, do your discovery day, you can do now, even if you're 1 to 2 years out from buying. Okay, so let's say you're doing that second set, maybe you're on your third set and you find the property of your dreams. Amazing. Unfortunately, in real estate, it is not finders keepers, although I wish it were. So you find this house, you're really interested in it, so we need to get an offer together. So a couple things that we're going to do as agents before you submit that offer. Number one is we're going to call the listing agent and ask any questions that you have. We're going to ask our own questions so that we know how to properly write the offer. We're going to see what the seller is most interested in and what's important to them. And we're going to check on the competitiveness of the situation. So we'll have that information to share with you. The second thing that we're going to do is run what are called comps. So basically what this is me looking at a home that's listed for sale on the market, and I'm trying to figure out how much it's worth so that you have that information to figure out what you want to offer. So I'm going to look at comparable sales all around the neighborhood, typically homes that have sold within the last 90 days with similar beds, baths, square footage, build type, build year, etc. And I'll make adjustments looking at that property compared to the one you're interested in. So because no 2 properties are created the same, right? There's differences. So I'll make adjustments and I'll go do that about 5 times. So I'll have 5 properties compared to yours. And I'll be able to come back and tell you, hey, based off of these 5 sales, what they've sold at with adjustments, this is what I think this property is worth. So in order to get your offer together, you'll have 3 important pieces of information, which is this is what the home is currently listed for. This is how competitive it is and what I think you're going to have to do to win it. And this is what I think it's worth. So you'll have that info before you write the offer. Together, we'll write that offer. It's a casual 23-page long document here in Colorado, no big deal. And once we've written the offer, we'll send it over to the seller. And a couple things can happen. So number one, they could counter your offer. So they say, listen, we love your price and terms, but that closing date just doesn't work for us. Can you move it up 2 days? Or maybe we love your dates and deadlines, but you're not our highest offer, but we still would like to work with you. Can you come up $3,000 in price? So that's how the counter offer would work. The second thing that can happen is they can reject you. They can flat out tell you no, or they can ghost you, right? So we don't get a deal together in that case. Or the third is they could accept it. So they could sign your offer as is. Nonetheless, what we're trying to do is get to a point where we've negotiated price and terms, or they've just accepted, but we have a mutual agreement of parties. So we have either a signed offer by everybody or a signed counter offer by everybody. And what this means now is that you are under contract. And that cute little freaking house right there is the first one that I bought in Denver. It does not look like that hardly at all anymore, but that was my first one. So you're under contract. A couple things I just want you guys to know about that terminology. This means that there's a legally binding contract in place between you and between the seller that you are going to purchase that property and that the seller is going to sell you that property. So what that means is that nobody else can come in underneath of you and take that home away from you. You have a legally binding document in front of you. And because you now have this legally binding document, now's the time that you're going to start to spend money on the property in your due diligence process to make sure that you actually want to close on it. So if you ever see properties on a site that say pending accepting backup offers, what they're saying is we have a first contract in place. So we're obligated to sell to that person, but we are accepting backup offers. So if something happened with this first contract and it fell out of contract, we'd be willing to work with somebody else. Okay, so the under contract steps here, there's 6 big ones. We'll go through each. The first is earnest money, so putting down a deposit on the property. The second is an inspection to make sure that thing's not falling over. The third is some title work to make sure that you can actually take ownership of the place. The fourth is insurance. Don't know if you've heard, but we have crazy hailstorms here in Colorado, so probably a good idea to insure your property. The fifth is an appraisal to make sure you're not overpaying. And then last but not least is the final loan approval that happens before closing. All right, I know I talk fast, so it can be hard to interrupt. So before I jump into these steps, any questions whatsoever so far? No? Okay. Let's chat earnest money. So the best way to describe earnest money is to give you a little bit of an example. So I used to run a construction business and we ran a painting job, right, for a customer. And that job was $10,000. And in order for that customer to get into my schedule, they had to put down a $3,000 deposit. And that money was refundable with certain criteria. So not just because they decided to not do it anymore, but if there was financial hardship or something of that nature, we would return the deposit. So at the end of that painting job, that customer owed me $7,000 when we were done because the whole job was 10. They gave me 3 up front, 7K at the end. Earnest money functions very similarly. So it's basically a deposit on the house. It's good faith money. This is typically due within 24 hours of going under contract. So oftentimes I have people that are going to transfer this money out of a high yield savings account or out of a retirement account. It's really important that as you get closer to writing your first offer, that you have these funds liquid. The third thing to know about it is that the title company holds on to it. So the seller selects the title company. The seller pays for the title work typically, and that title company is supposed to be like an unbiased third party. So we can trust them to hold on to your money. So the title company will hold it. It's usually around $3 to $5 grand, sometimes up to 10, depending on the purchase price. On new builds, I've seen it as high as 25 to 35,000. But on resale properties, usually closer to that 3 to 10K range. And then this counts towards your down payment. So similar to the example I gave, if you were going to put $10,000 down as your down payment, and there was $3,000 of earnest money due, you would drop that off, and then now you would just bring the $7,000 difference to closing. Additionally, there's some conditions with this earnest money. If you lie or you don't follow that legally binding agreement that you have on the property, you can actually lose this earnest money. So it's really, really important that you have a good relationship with your agent, that your agent knows what the heck they're doing, and then you listen to your agent if all of those other things apply. I have never had a client lose their earnest money, knock on wood, even in one case when he absolutely should have. Lied to me, lied to the lender, lied to everybody, and 2 days before closing, the deal fell out of contract. still got his freaking earnest money back. Okay, so you've dropped off your earnest money. The second thing that's going to happen is your inspection. I've got great inspectors here in Denver. There's two that I love named Mike and Trevor. They're my go-to guys. As I mentioned, my background's in construction, so I'm pretty freaking picky. They're with Pillar to Post. They're amazing. So as soon as you go under contract, there's a lot going on. You've got to drop off earnest money, pay for an inspection, get your loan locked in, and all of this stuff is happening while you're trying to work normal lives. So typically I will ask for your permission to take care of this for you. So I will call and schedule your inspection. I'll get it set up. I'll tell you which things I recommend that you do, aka which tests that you do, so that all you have to do is pay for it and show up at the time of the inspection. Things to know about the inspection: it's a limited exam of the home. So inspectors are wonderful. They have a bunch of great gadgets and tools to help them assess what's going on in a house, but they are not by any means ripping out drywall of a home that they don't own to see how the place was framed. However, they're very good at noticing that something could be wrong by clues that typically indicate that something is wrong. So it is a limited exam of the home. The thing I want you to also know about the inspection is that you pay for this inspection at the time of the inspection, and this is the one cost that is outside of that total cash to close that the lender gives you. So when you're talking to the lender, if you see $20,000 as your total cash to close, just know you've got this other sum of money you're going to pay that's outside of that. Typical cost of an inspection on a condo, it's between $400 and $600. On a townhome, closer to $600 to $1,000. On a single family home, it can be from $1,000 all the way up to $2,000 if you add every single test that they have. And some of that's based off of square footage of the property too. So if you buy a really huge home, you're going to be closer to that 1,500 range. So you'll pay for that inspection, you'll get that inspection. And if you decide to not buy the home at that point, you are more than welcome to do that. You will get your earnest money back if you decide to terminate, because this is one of your rights as a buyer, but you're not going to get that inspection cost back because you paid for an inspection, you had the inspection, so that money's gone. But let's say that didn't happen. Let's say you paid for the inspection, you go through it with the inspector and you want to proceed. Great. They're going to give you a detailed report of the property. No joke, the inspection reports that we typically get from our guys are between 25 and 40 pages. So they're absolutely going to find things that are wrong. That's their job. But about 95% of the stuff on that inspection report is typically really small, minor, or homeowner type maintenance or FYI kind of things for you. There's typically only a couple of items, and I say typically because it's not always, but typically there are only a couple of items that are a little bit more expensive. And hopefully we would have already identified that stuff for you at the showing. So you shouldn't have major surprises at an inspection if you're working with our team. The two things that we cannot see at a time of a showing is the sewer. So you will need to do a sewer scope. And we also don't typically bring a ladder and climb up on the roof. So the roof is the other one that could be a question mark. So you'll get this report. And from that report, let's say there's a couple of things that are important to you to get fixed. Lovely. Negotiations follow this. So you can go to the seller and ask them to address these things. And you could ask them to address these things by fixing them or by asking for credits. Our team typically leans towards credits depending on the item at hand, because what I have found in my experience is if you ask the seller to fix something, they're generally going to try to go with the cheapest company, not the best. So I would rather get a quote from my preferred person that I know is going to do a great job for you, and then you get a credit for that amount and you do the work right after closing. That doesn't apply to all items, but to most. Last thing I want to tell you about inspections is that there are two tests that our team essentially mandates that you do as a part of your inspection. So outside of your base inspection, we also essentially require you to also do a radon test and a sewer scope. So a radon test is about $150. Radon, if you don't know what it is a colorless, odorless, cancer-causing gas. It's one of the leading causes of cancer in the United States. It comes from the ground. And again, it's colorless and it's odorless. So there's no way to know if it's there unless you pay for a radon test. So please pay the $150, get the radon results back. If radon is high, which is very common in Colorado, It's okay. It's typically about a $1,300 mitigation process to get a system installed that mitigates the radon for you. So well worth it to do the $150 test. Again, the system is not very expensive. On the flip side of that, you've got a sewer scope. So sewer lines run from underneath of the home. All of the main drains connect, right? Go into a sewer line, and then that runs out to the city sewer. Lovely. But that sewer line is underground, and you can't see it unless you take a tiny little camera and shove it down the drain all the way out to the city sewer. Average sewer replacement for a standard lot in Denver, if you have to replace the whole line, is around $25,000. So again, absolutely worth that $150 to make sure that that sewer line is in good shape. And the cheapest sewer repair I have ever had is $3,000. So again, definitely worth doing. Inspection is one of these things that I think most buyers get nervous about. So I just want to pause really quick again for questions. We've talked about earnest money. We've talked about inspection. Any hypothetical scenarios or questions running through your brains?
Hey, Chelsea, who sets the amount for earnest money?
Great question. Thank you for asking. The seller. And then that amount is actually public for us. You guys can't typically see it. It depends. But it's advertised in the MLS. So we will be able to tell you if you're looking at a property, if you're like, hey, what's the earnest money? We can say, oh, it's 10K on this one, or it's 5K on this one, or whatever. Good question. And it's negotiable too. So if they were asking for 10,000, it was non-competitive, you didn't feel comfortable with that, you can put down 5. Other cuestiones? Seeing none, let's move on to title. All right, title. So if you've ever purchased a car, you've kind of gone through this process before-ish. So essentially, when you're going to buy a property, it's really important that no one else claims that they own that property so that it can actually be transferred to you. So kind of similar to a car where you've got the title to a car and the seller signs it and then the buyer gets it, and the buyer signs it, and then you go register it with the county. Similar, a lot more paperwork. So the seller selects the title company. As I mentioned before, the seller will pay for the title company, and that's typically paid at closing. So there's not usually a whole lot you have to do with title work as long as it comes back clean, because the seller picks the company, they order the title work, and then you get a copy of that title commitment. You're just going to read that title commitment and make sure that your name is spelled correctly, the property is listed that you intend to buy, and that there's nothing funky on the title commitment. And then at closing, that commitment turns into insurance. And now you will have title insurance moving forward. And title insurance protects you from loss or damage due to liens, encumbrances, encroachments, et cetera, et cetera. So let me go back to that painting example that I gave you before. But let's assume that that customer, because now this is a true story, decided that they did not want to pay the balance that was owed at the end of the job. Okay, so it's $10,000 job. Let's say the homeowner paid $7,000 and they didn't want to pay the last $3,000. Great, you don't want to pay for the work that we did, no problem. I walked down to the county and I filed what's called a mechanics lien. Mechanics lien basically states that I own the paint that's on that woman's house because she hasn't paid for it. So if I own part of that house, how is she going to be able to sell it without my permission? And the answer is she can't. She would have to pay me off and for me to agree to release that lien. So when the title company is providing a title commitment, they're also going to show if anybody is claiming some sort of interest in the property, such as a lien. Fun fact, I still have a lien on that woman's home in Cleveland. It's been like literally over 10 years and she still owes me $800. I'm not going to let it go. I can't. It's the principle, you know? So that's title insurance. Should be easy breezy, lemon squeezy, typically, but not always. The next thing that happens is insurance. So this is your largest financial purchase you've probably ever made. Good idea to have insurance. And in fact, the lender is going to require it anyways. So you're going to have it. We have a couple of preferred insurance brokers, again, that we will send to you. Shop, shop, shop if you want. The good news about my insurance broker is that she is a broker. So really quick, I might be able to save you money in your life right now. Does anybody know the difference between an insurance agent and an insurance broker? No? Okay. So an insurance agent is somebody that works for one insurance company. So they're hired by Progressive, as an example. So when you go call that person, that insurance agent, and they give you an insurance quote, they're only providing you with a quote from whatever Progressive is offering at that time. When you work with an insurance broker, they shop across a bunch of different carriers. So mine in particular, Lisa Lundquist, she shops across 25 different carriers. So she'll shop across Progressive, Nationwide, Geico, et cetera, and tell you, hey, right now, this company is offering the best rate for the correct amount of coverage. So if you right now are paying renter's insurance, car insurance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'm still happy to send you Lisa's info because she can probably get you a better deal on your insurance than what you're paying right now. Fun facts. The other thing that I want to mention about this that's really important is if you live in Colorado, you guys are aware of the Marshall fires that we had a couple of years ago. There have been some really substantial changes in the insurance world as it relates to properties. So one of the things that I've seen happen with insurance agents and insurance brokers since then is sometimes similar to like what lenders will do, where they will say, hey, look at my rate, it's better, but they're charging you to get that better rate. It's kind of a similar thing on the insurance side. They'll say, oh yeah, look, I'm cheaper. But in order to get cheaper, they reduced the amount of coverage that they gave you. So important that you make sure that you have the right coverage. So many people, unfortunately, learned a really difficult lesson during the Marshall fires because so many of those people were actually underinsured and didn't have enough money to rebuild their homes. So please make sure that you don't just try to save 20 bucks a month and go with the cheaper person, and you make sure that you have the right coverage. Okay, so now you've dropped off your earnest money, you've made sure the house isn't falling over, you've had some title work done, you've gotten insurance on the property. The last two steps pertain to your loan. So while you are under contract, the lender is going to hire an appraiser to go out to the property. And that appraiser is going to do a very similar process to what I did at the beginning of running comps to tell you what it was worth. They're going to do that, but way more in depth because they're licensed appraisers. And they're going to come back and tell us what they believe the fair market value of the home is. This is a critical point in the deal because you cannot get a loan for more than what the property is worth. So let's run through the three scenarios that can happen. So let's say you're under contract on a property at $500,000. The appraiser goes out and comes back and says, guess what? Your property is worth $500,000. So it appraised for what you're paying for it. Perfect. Nothing happens. Life is good. That's all we're hoping for. Now let's say that the appraiser comes back and says that that property is worth $520,000. Wonderful. You're paying $500,000 for a property that's worth $520,000. That means you're underpaying by $20,000. That's when you take me to dinner, buy me a bottle of wine, something like that, because I just did a great job for you. Just kidding. I don't care about any of that. But the good news is that you just literally walked into equity. You're underpaying for a property. So that's a wonderful thing. So nothing really happens in those two cases. The only time we have a problem is the third situation, which is if the appraisal comes back below the contract price. So with the same example, let's say you're under contract at $500,000 and you're under contract at $500,000. And even though the property was listed at $450,000 because it was super competitive and you just wanted to win, right? So you just shot out your best offer and it was $500,000. So let's say that the property comes back that it's only worth $490,000. Now we have an issue because this means that the property is worth $490,000, but you're overpaying by $10,000 and you're paying $500,000. So you can only get your loan approved for $490,000. So now we have this $10,000 gap that we've got to get figured out. Three things can happen there with that $10,000 gap. You can say, listen, I made a buckets of cash. I'll pull $10,000 out from underneath in my mattress and I will bring that to closing to make up the difference. Or you could say, no way, Jose, seller, you need to come down 10 grand. I'm not overpaying for this property. Or the third is a nice little in between. Maybe you bring $2,000 to the table and the seller comes down 8,000 in the price. But either way, we have to come to some sort of an agreement because you can't presently close on that property while being under contract at that higher price. One other quick thing on this, if for some reason you end up in that sticky situation and you can't come to an agreement with the seller, so you say, nope, I'm not overpaying, you come down 10, they say, nope, we're good, fine. You can terminate the deal and you will get your earnest money back in this case, as long as you didn't make any guarantees in your offer saying that you were going to bring this difference to the table. But at this point, you've paid for your inspection, which let's just say was $1,000. And now you've paid for your appraisal, which is about $600. So you've invested roughly $1,500 into this property at this point. So you're going to lose that, call it $1,500 bucks. So I just want you to know that. This is why it's so important that you have an agent that understands houses so you don't have a problem at inspection, and that they know how to run accurate comps so that you don't have a surprise at the appraisal. Sam, your hand is raised.
I was curious, just given how the market is here and like the cost of like just the general cost of living in the homes that I've seen, does that happen frequently?
Does
Or,
what,
like,
the appraisal come in low?
Yeah, the like in the chance it's like it's under purchase price or something like that.
It's such a good question. So how it is now is not, it's competitive, but it is nothing compared to what it was 2 years ago. So 2020, 2021, and part of 2022, people were promising their unborn children in order to get under contract on a home. So there were people writing $100,000 over the list price. During that, and I'm getting to your question in a long way, which is during that crazy time period, I ran the biggest business I've ever run, was ranked in the top 1.5% of agents in the country. So it's not like I wasn't out there selling a shit ton of homes. And I had 2 properties come in below the contract price. And my clients knew going in that that was going to happen. One was by $3,000 and one was by $15,000. So even during the absolute sheer chaos, I did not have that happen in my business because I know how to run comps. And there were a couple properties I had to talk clients out of. Like, listen, I know you really want this, but you're literally going to pay $40,000 above the appraised value for this property. And what happens when the market shifts, which it did literally then Easter of 2022. So there are people that overpaid drastically for homes at that time that could not turn around and sell their houses today without writing a check. So I didn't have any clients end up in that extreme of a situation, just 2 appraisals come in low. Since then, I have not had any appraisals come in low with my clients. However, but I do hear that this happens. It's just not to my people.
That's great.
Part of this, yeah, thank you for asking that question. I do have one more bit of info I want to share with you guys on this, which like this shouldn't matter because an appraiser is supposed to be an unbiased person, right? Meaning it doesn't matter what lender they get hired by. It should be the same value every time, but it's not. So the one other thing that I want to leave you with is if you are considering working with a bank or a credit union, they tend to have more rules, more regulations, more red tape, and they are a little bit tighter in everything. And I find that the appraisers that they hire are hyper conservative. So if you end up working with that type of lender, your likelihood of having an appraisal come in low is higher. But if you work with my preferred people, that does not happen. So just know that. That was a wonderful question, Sam. Any other questions on appraisals before we go on to the last step? Seeing none, we continue. Loan approval. So that whole time, all of this other stuff was going on, and that whole process might have taken you 2 weeks. That's kind of the shortest we'll do a close, or it might have taken 30 days. That's about the longest we'll do a closing. That whole time, the lender was working on your loan. So now that they know what property you're actually buying, they can finalize numbers, finalize your loan, and it takes them that whole time to actually get you a loan approval. One thing I want to say to you, I'm going to scare you right now, and that's great. For the love of Houdini, when you are under contract, please, please, I beg of thee, do not quit your job. Do not retire. Do not go buy a hot tub. Do not buy a car. Please do not do anything that's going to substantially change your debt, your income, or your credit report, because you might actually cost yourself that loan. So the client of mine who was unfortunately a dear friend of mine that fell out of contract 2 days before closing basically told me and told the lender that he made X number of dollars because he was self-employed, and that that's what he was going to be filing his taxes to say. And while under contract, he filed his taxes to say that it was half of that amount. So lo and behold, he didn't qualify for the loan, found out 2 days before closing. I've never had, knock on wood, crazy situations that other agents tell me where like literally clients buy a car the day before closing, they cost themselves their loan. There's all sorts of things that can happen. If you need to make a major financial decision while under contract, just call the lender first and make sure that you're good so you don't mess up. And that's it. All you got to do is show up, do a little walkthrough of your house, make sure it didn't flood or burn down. Then you go to the title office with your license, also some money, you sign your life away, you take some photos to dress nice, and then you pop a bottle of champagne or several, whatever your vibe is. And that's it, you bought a house. Questions for me before I spend a quick little 10 minutes on the most important part of the presentation? Any questions about the buying process whatsoever? Sweet. Let's do this fun stuff. Owning versus renting. There are a couple of distinct advantages of owning a home. We'll go through them each, so don't stress. Number one is you build equity when you own a home. Number two is there are some distinct tax advantages. Number three, you purchase an appreciating asset. And number four, it gives you more financial leverage than any other financial vehicle can. Let's talk about equity. We're going to ease in. So what the heck is equity? Simply put, equity is the difference between what something is worth and what you owe on it. So if you own a $500,000 home and you have a $200,000 loan, in theory, if you went and sold that property, you would have roughly $300,000 in your pocket, right? You've got $300K in equity. This is a rhetorical question. Don't answer. It'll embarrass yourselves. How much money do you get back from renting? And there's usually one smart ass that likes to say, well, what about my security deposit? That doesn't count. You gave a security deposit, you got it back. That was, that's not you making money. So you don't get any money back from renting. You build equity when you own. So for all of the haters that are like, yeah, but it's not free money, you're paying interest. Listen, even if you take into account the interest, I don't know about you, but I'd rather get some of my money back than none of my money. And that's assuming that the property doesn't go up in value. Okay, so you will build equity. That's huge. The second thing is you're buying an appreciating asset. So an appreciating asset is something that goes up in value over time, while a depreciating asset is something that goes down in value over time. I've already called it out in this presentation. Depreciating assets are our worst nightmare, and they are cars. Worst thing you can spend money on. I wish people would stop buying flashy cars. Buy something that makes sense for you, that is cheap, that is reasonable. Stop buying this really expensive car. It's insane. They just go down. Things that go up in value over time, think antiques, right? The older it gets, the more it's worth. Every once in a while, I also get a smart ass that says, well, what about a classic car? That's an antique that goes up in value over time. It's not a traditional car. Okay, so if you had to put your money into one of those classes, of course, you want to put it into something that's going up in value over time. So before I can tell you the secret sauce of buying real estate, I have to explain compound interest to you. So I'm going to put it as easily as I can. So compound interest is essentially investing money into an account. You get paid an interest payment on that money. And so you just leave that payment in the account. And I'll give you an example, but let's say you put in 20 grand, you've made $1,000 in an interest payment, you just leave it there. So now you have $21,000. And then the next year, you actually gain interest on that new balance, that 21,000, which means that you're actually gaining interest on interest that you've already been paid. So that interest starts to compound. Not all accounts work like that. So, quick example of what you might be doing right now is you take $20,000 from your W-2 job and you invest it into an IRA, a 401k, something having to do with the stock market. And let's assume that, just for example's sake, that you were going to get 4% every year. So it wasn't going to go up or down. You're going to gain 4% every year, fixed. So in year one, 4% of $20,000 is $800. So that's the interest payment that you get paid in year one. And as I said before, you're just going to park that money there. So you leave that money, so your balance just grew from 20,000 to 20,800. You didn't contribute more, you just left the interest payment there. Wonderful. So now in year two, that 4% is going to be based off of your new balance, which is 20,800. So your interest payment goes up to $832. You then leave that money in your account again, so your balance grows to 21,632. So in year three, your 4% interest payment is based off of that new balance. So your payment goes up to 866. So on and so forth. What you can see is that you're not contributing any more money, but your balance is starting to go up quicker. And as your balance goes up, your interest payments get higher. So it starts to compound really quickly. So if you kept going with this example at year 30, that $20,000 that you invested originally would have turned into $64,867. So it tripled. That's wonderful. It's nothing to scoff at by any means. So I just went through this first example with you. Here is the only thing I want you to take away from this entire presentation tonight. It's the next words I'm going to say. Real estate is different in the sense that you'll take that same $20,000 and you'll put it down on a property, but it isn't your $20,000. It's not that 20K down payment that's gaining money every year. It's the entire value of the asset. It's the whole purchase price of that property that goes up in value. So as an example, if you take that same $20,000 and instead you put it down on a $300,000 home, it's that $300,000 that's going to gain 4% year over year. So at the end of 30 years, all things equal, that $300,000 home turns into $973,000. If you don't think that that example sounds realistic, two of my close friends, Sam, you know them, recently purchased a property. They paid, I think, $565,000 for that property. And just over 35 years ago, the sellers had paid, get this, like $32,000 for that property. 32 grand up to 565. So yeah, it is very likely that 30 years from now, a $300,000 property would be worth $973,000. So what's insane is that same 20K investment at the end of 30 years, it is now worth 64 times your original investment rather than triple. This really simple principle is the reason that 96% of millionaires have become millionaires by investing in real estate. If you cannot tell, I'm very passionate about this, but I just see so many people leasing cars, buying really nice cars because it makes them feel good and still paying rent. And instead they could be putting themselves in a much better financial situation so that they could stop the rat race and stop working at some point. So in conclusion, owning is better than renting. It was so short, right? Questions? No, sorry, one more thing. What's next? What I was just talking about, that financial leverage. So I learned that early on and realized, holy shit, I could retire by the time I'm 37 if I just start applying this principle when I was 24, 23. So I literally went to a coffee shop, wrote out a plan of what it would take in rental income for me to quit working, found out I could retire by 37. I went and bought my 6 properties. I'm now 31, turning 32 later this year, and I am on track to retire by the age of 37 because of this class that I teach, which is called house hacking. So Denver's really expensive. It's very difficult to get into investing if you don't know how or the smart way. So I teach this class every other month. My next one is on March 20th at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time online. Would love to have you. If you need info for that class, you can get in touch with me with one of these ways. I'd love to have you. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming, and I will answer any and all questions that you all have. Meow.